everyone. I'm your host, film critic, and journalist. And today I'm very happy to be joined by the filmmaker of Girls Will Be Girls, Suchi Talati, to talk about her film because I saw it first in Sundance and I love the film and I didn't get a chance to speak to you there. So when I saw that the film was showing here for South by Southwest, I was like, I have to try again. And so I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me, Suchi.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to hear that and to be here.
Yeah, I love the film and it had a great audience reaction at the screening that I was at in Sundance. I unfortunately didn't get to see it in person for South by Southwest because I'm here in Toronto and I watched it virtually, but I still loved it. My first question to you about this film is teenage angst. Female and teenage angst. Tell me first about what inspired you to make a feature film about this, about female angst in particular, and but female angst in an Indian school in the Himalaya mountains and a secondary school, because I'm familiar with the secondary school system. So I was like, she was a head prefect. I was a prefect, not head. I didn't want to be head, but I was a prefect in school. So talk to me about making a film in
Yeah,
that particular setting and location with that environment.
yeah, that's a great question because I think the setting and environment is really important to this film. So I went to a school much like the school in my film. I mean, I didn't go to a boarding school. I was always fascinated by them, but the ethos of my school was the same. We did a very strict pledge every morning. We were all in uniforms. Uh, Forget dating. I mean, even like talking too much to boys could get you into trouble.
Mhm.
I mean, I have had teachers who were like, hey, we see you by the boys' hostel too often, or like somebody being like, oh, I think when we were in eighth grade, the teachers pulled all the girls aside and were like, oh, your skirts are too short. And so, and if anything happened, the responsibility was always on girls. And also, we were just beginning, I feel like we were shamed all the time for having any like romantic sexual feelings, for just having like becoming women.
Mhm.
And I know that when I had my first boyfriend in high school, because of course teenagers are teenagers everywhere and we sneak around as we have to, I didn't actually tell my best friend. Like when we kissed, when we made out, like my best friend did not know. Because I thought she would be, I don't know, she would judge me.
Mhm.
She would think I was slutty or loose or I don't know what. And now that I look back on it, I think that's really sad. And I really wanted to write a story about this young girl in this very intense environment, which like really tries to constrict her. But within that, for her to have like a sexual awakening, and for the filmmaking and for the perspective of the film to not shame it at all, to treat it as something really normal, to treat it as something beautiful, her sexual awakening, like whether it's learning to masturbate or whether it's like looking down there and being like, ooh, what's that? you know like just all of that, just keep it real and like celebrate that.
Yeah, I was looking up your bio and it says you're interested in making films about this, about female identity, and also about the struggles that girls and women are faced with in society, especially in very patriarchal, very structured societies. Do you think that because of the fact that even here in the West, in the Western world, and like USA, like globally, like people make films about female identity and about sexual awakening and all of that, they very rarely approach it from a perspective of where you're in a setting that is already constrained by specific structures within the school. Like the school is very structured within itself,
Yeah.
so like for whereas like for instance in North America, in a film about sexual awakening, they might focus it in a school, but the school isn't structured the same way that a school would be like in the Caribbean and in Britain and in India, where you have like you have prefect system, you have like the head teachers, the principals, we have like all of these different structures within the school. So like that's a very different and a very unique setting. So do you think that like having grown up in that system and in that culture is what makes you like want to focus on like all of the different ways that women and girls are like just held in by systems, like different systems of oppression?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, just like also to think about like the specifics of this school, like there's so many, you're right about how many systems there are. There's like the general patriarchy in the sense of like also in the Indian context. Then there's this school, there's a principal on top, there's like the other teachers, the female teachers in the school who often uphold the patriarchal concept. I mean, the school there in the film, there's like a teacher who's sort of like a second mother figure to our
Yeah.
protagonist, Mira. But then you really come to realize that it's like, well, more than anything, her loyalty is not to Mira, it's to
Mhm.
the rules of this world. And then there is like Mira, our protagonist, who is also like, as the head prefect, she's in this really, I would say, like messed up situation where she is both like a student, but she also has to look at the other students and including her friends and police them. And which I think is so her loyalty is split between her friends and her teachers, who have put her in charge of like policing her friends. So I think it's really interesting to explore women kind of like breaking out, or how women sometimes they can't like break out the way they can in the West. But I knew growing up, women were always subverting and circumventing whatever rules that were put on them. And I'm definitely extremely interested in this. And also, I think this is related. Like the structures are very important to my storytelling, but in a way, my stories are extremely intimate. I'm looking very closely also within relationships, within Mira and her boyfriend, Mira and her young mom, who is like watching her daughter come into her womanhood, but feeling like a little both like pride and like, wow, okay, you have more freedoms than me. You can wear a mini skirt, but
Yeah.
also like feeling really sad for her own lost youth. So the structures are important, but I think this micro focus is really also very important to me, because what that allows me to do is get really specific and not tell a story about like all Indian women. Mira is not all Indian girls, her mom is not all Indian women. It's like they're very specific and unique. And I mean, we know that like characters from like white characters have been allowed this freedom all the time. And then when people of color make films, it's like, oh, you're telling a story about all of India and women's oppression. And
Right?
that yeah, exactly. And that really flattens our characters. And it's like our stories don't have meaning unless they are like social issue films that
Right?
are there to teach you something, and I really like try to separate from that mold.
It is, yeah, because I just see this story as well. Yes, there is broader context with regards to like a patriarchal society and how boys are conditioned to like judge girls and sexualize girls very easily. Like that's a part of the story, but that's not only just part of Indian culture. That's everywhere, because it happens everywhere. I'm from the Caribbean and from Barbados, and I've had the experience where the teacher measures the skirt, and says like you need to bring it up. And the things I went to an all girl school, but there was a school, a boys' school, like not too like close to our bill our compound. And then like there were sometimes you have like student exchange programs, like like a special day, and they bring boys from the other boys' school in the island. And the teachers before would be like, girls, make sure your skirts are to your knees and whatever. And I would be like, what? And I remember like one very distinct day. I'm 5 feet now as an adult, but I was in school. I was very short. It was
Yeah.
even shorter. And like they wanted our skirts to be at our knee or cut it in the middle of your knees. And my teacher was like, your skirt needs to be longer. And I'm like, my skirt is at my knee. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Trip and fall up this going up the stairs? And it was a battle. They're like, girls need to be more circumspect. You can't wear like a bra that has like a pattern because our shirts were white, right? So like if the light hits
Oh,
you, like you could see
so you
through
could
the
see
shirt,
through.
right? So they'd be like, can't wear shirt. We couldn't wear bras with like patterns on them, And if you did, you have to wear like a vest on the inside of your shirt and all of this. We had all of these rules even within the school, and like it's just a bunch of girls. But then they'd be like, you have male teachers and male custodian staff. And I'm like, that's not our problem. But like they teach us from very early to
Oh
be
my God.
to be cognizant of what men think of us instead of telling men and boys, keep your eyes to yourself, like we would say back, that's what we say, Marcus, keep your eyes to yourself. But they bring us up to be like conscious of what men thinks of us. but they don't bring boys up to be conscious of what we think of them. Like, what
Totally.
about how I think you're a jerk? Are you not concerned with your son thinking that girl, realizing that girls think the way you treat me makes me think you're a jerk? I can't trust you. I can't believe anything you say, right?
100%. I think this like boys will be boys culture is like that like transcends cultures
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, right? Like you experience the same thing in Barbados that I did in India, and I feel like it's really true here too, in the US and Canada.
Yeah, they'll say, "Oh, we're more liberal, progressive on it." I'm like, but are you really? Like even like yeah, you can wear whatever you want, but then there's still, as women, in the back of our heads, we're still very conscious of, again, how, when we go through the door, am I revealing too much? Like I have to be conscious of how I'm sitting and that kind of stuff, and like it's brought it's really settled within us, like in subconsciously, and the film really does, I think, um highlights that in very subtle ways. Like one of the scenes, and I think this is a scene that only women and young girls would really pick up on, is like when Anila, who's the mom played by Kani Kusruti, takes Mira, played by Preeti Panigrahi, to the store, and the thing that Mira asks Anila, like, can you see my underwear printing through the skirt?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's something that only really women that are also very self-conscious, that are brought up to be very self-conscious of what they wear, will say and ask, and like I'm an adult and I still have that very conscious thought in my head. If I'm wearing a skirt, like is my underwear printing out? And then like Anila says, we'll just have to wear seamless underwear. These are things that women have to consider. And like you
I
have
know.
so many
And
of
it's
those
like,
small moments in the film, and I'm like, that's the female experience right there.
oh, I'm so glad you picked up on it. Yeah, because it's like, why, like everyone wears underwear. I mean, or maybe some people don't. But it's like if you see the outline of your underwear, what is the big deal?
I
But
know,
I
right?
yeah, but I think as like we're raised in this, yeah, like with all this, like, oh my God, we can't show the underwear if there's a bra strap showing, or if you when you get a period. I remember if anyone stained their skirts, it was so tragic. I mean, everyone would feel so ashamed. So that we really have this shame around our bodies, which like I don't get it. Like, and it's very hard to get rid of even as an adult. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
still am like, is my is my panty line showing? And then I be like, it's okay, it's not a problem. But I still feel conscious about it, even though
Yes.
intellectually I'm like, it should not be a problem, but emotionally it's so deep.
Right, it is, and there's so many of those small moments you include in the film, especially in the moments between Mira and Anila, and that's what really makes the film, I think, really, like, the film is girls will be girls, and you subverting the whole trope of boys will be boys, and you're showing like this is the girls' experience. But there's so many of those moments where I'm like, yes, I've had those moments with my mom, but I've also had those moments with the girls that I went to school with, and with my sister, and with my friends. And I want you to talk about just making the film really grounded on female relationships, but also the complexity of mother-daughter relationships, where the daughter has one perception of her mom, but it's like she's coming from this idea of, because she's a teenager, Mira thinks she knows everything that about her mom. She thinks she understands her mother. She thinks she understands femininity. She thinks she understands female relationships, and even male and female relationships. She has all these things that she thinks, because she's also smart. She's a head prefect. I'm the perfect student. Therefore, I know everything. But it's like I'm like, you're thinking, but you don't know anything about your mom, Mira. Like you really don't understand. So talk to me about making the film really about this relationship, and about the, I think, the misconceptions that Mira has about her own mom.
Oh, what a great question. Because for me, this relationship between Mira and her mom is the central love story of the film. You feel like actually in the beginning you might feel the love stories with this boy, the boyfriend, but that's not the real thing. It's between her and her mom, and it's because of this. First, there's like Mira has the arrogance of teenagers, like you pointed out. Like teenagers feel like they know, they see everything, they have like they can cut through the bullshit, and like the parents are like, oh my God, the parents seem like losers. It's like it's the way when you start to separate, you really like have this like arrogance. And Mira, even though I think her sometimes sense of I know it all is protecting like this deep vulnerability she has inside, where she feels uncomfortable, she doesn't. And so she has this little armor. And in this armor, I think seeing her mom, so Mira is in the film, she's 16, her mom is 39. So
Right. So she's still young, yeah.
young mom had a child in her early 20s, and now she's still a young woman when she has like a teenage daughter. And I think and the film is set in this time in India. I'll just give a little context. It's set in the 90s, which was a pretty interesting time in India because for the first time, the Indian economy was opened up to Western exports. So
Mhm.
that meant like you could buy a pair of jeans for the first time, you could buy a mini skirt for the first time, so all of these things for like teenagers at that time became like a mark of rebellion.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, if her mom
and
said I'm going to try on these capris, that's when I kind of figured out the timeline. I'm like, because no one is wearing capris anymore.
Oh, yes, exactly. That's a little, yeah, tiny little thing. And so most of the moms at that time were not changing how they were wearing.
Mhm.
And only a few moms. So you see Anila in the film often wears jeans and pants, and the other moms and the other teachers are always in saris and salwar kurtas and like traditional Indian clothes. So already the mom is trying to have the same experience that the daughter is trying to have. And the other way she shows it is she's very friendly with Mira's girlfriends too. She's like kind of has this thing of like, I'm so cool, and my daughter, head prefect rule follower, is so boring. And so she does that with Mira's best friend too, tries to have that relationship. And I think for Mira, it just feels like her mom's kind of a lame and a loser. It's like, why are you trying to live my life? Like it's because you've made bad choices in your life, and I will never be like you. And I think like her journey is to really kind of come to see this mother. Yes, she's really can be annoying and she's trying to live through Mira, but like when push comes to shove, she's like a fierce lioness who will show up for her daughter. And so there's like this love and security, this bedrock underneath that Mira sometimes has ignored that she kind of comes to see. And then the other thing is that she really kind of comes to see her mother as a person, a full person. And in some ways, that is like when you can see your parent as a full person and not just as your parent, I feel like that's such a big part of growing up. And she kind of for the first time begins to see her mom's vulnerability and like her sadness and her like the losses in her life, like just like her mom didn't have the chance that Mira has to date this boy and decide that he may or may not be the right boy. Her mom had to marry the first person she dated, whether or not that worked out. Mira is a bright student, will probably go on to have some kind of a career. Her mom didn't have that choice. So now her mom is just like a mom and a wife, and that's where she's supposed to find fulfillment. I mean, in there's this trope in Indian cinema, and like I feel like actually in life that moms find joy in sacrifice.
Yeah, which is
You
a
know,
lie. I
like
don't.
no desire. There's like sacrificing everything is how they feel good. And so to just really kind of see her mom as a human, and for the first time, like not judge her for like her wanting to have fun and get some attention, but actually see the vulnerability behind that, is like to me that like that's really important. And in some ways, like I feel like in my life I probably didn't make that transition until a little bit later. I did not come to this complex realization and love for this different, I mean, love my mom. My mom's awesome, but didn't come to this realization of seeing her this way until later. But of course, in our films, we can allow our characters to be a little wiser than we are. And
Yeah.
Mira can see it even as a teenager.
Yeah, and I think that's important because even though Anila had to marry the first man she dated and had Mira very young, she understands the world way better than Mira does. But
Yeah.
but Mira thinks she doesn't. Mira thinks she knows and that she understands, but she's not a very observant person because the thing is, she goes from being raised by her mom at home and then straight into boarding school. So she hasn't really seen the world. She just has this idea because she knows and because she's educated and she's what we would call book smart that
Yeah.
she's worldly, but she's not. And you see in the way how she likes that she's trying to discuss having sex with her boyfriend, who's also her first boyfriend, Sri, played by Kesav Binoy Kiron, and she's trying to approach it from like an adult thing. Like, I want to know everything. I want to research it. Going to like a internet cafe, dial up R.I.P. dial-up. I was like, hey, been there. That was just like a little nod to the 90s people. So like,
Yeah.
you know, so like they're now getting in learning about internet at the wife and all of this access to information. And she thinks she's so smart because she has this access to all this information that her mom doesn't have. You know, her mom doesn't have access to computer. She doesn't have access to the internet. And so Mira is thinking, I'm worldly. I know about sex because I read about sex, you know, and like you
Yeah.
haven't experienced it. Like book sense is not common sense, you know. But she kind of uses it to lord over her mom, and it's an interesting dynamic you use put in the film, where is like you have this triangle with Sri and Anila and Mira, and it seems to anyone who's not really paying attention to the nuances that Anila is trying to insert herself between Sri, but I never saw it as she's trying to insert herself. And I saw it as the way she's for one thing, protecting Mira from herself, because Mira doesn't understand boys. She doesn't understand men. She doesn't understand how people look at girls and female and male and female relationships from the outside, but she also doesn't understand how men think, you know? So Anila's protecting Mira from herself that way, but she's also having someone who's paying attention to her in a way that Mira doesn't. You know, Mira brushes aside her intelligence because Anila is very smart. She's very intelligent, but Mira dismisses that. Sri listens to her. You know, she cooks for Mira, but Mira doesn't really appreciate the food she cooks. Sri does. You know, he's there, but I think he's also like a fill-in for not her husband, but for the potential second boyfriend she could have had. You know, like he's like the second boyfriend she never got to have. And it's not that she's looking at him in a sexual way. She's just looking at it as like, I've never had a male friend. You know, I've never had a male companion. I've never had a male who just sees me as me. And I think that's such an interesting dynamic you're creating in a film. And like Mira is kind of like the person on the outside. I see this film more as a coming of age film from Anila than it is for
Yeah.
Mira, you know?
Yeah.
And so talk to me about that.
Oh, I love so many of the things that you said. I mean, for me, it's a coming of age for both of them. I always call it, I sometimes call it a dual mother-daughter coming of
Yeah.
age. Um, but yeah, some of the things that, like, yeah, Mira thinks she's book smart, but in some ways, her mom is reading her like a book. Her mom, like, mom knows, like, as soon as she's dressed like that, where is she going? And when she comes back, and the way she's like, "Hi, mom," and her mom's like, "Where were you?" You know, like it's just like the tone, and it's like moms know. And the mom is very, I mean, the mom's probably done her share of sneaking around when she was in, or and she knows her daughter, so she knows she's up to some naughty stuff with Shri. And both she's like, I think you're 100% right. I love how you put it. It's like on the one hand, she is trying to protect her daughter. You know, she's one step ahead and she's playing, there's this game of chess almost. And she's like, okay, no, Shri will no longer study with you in your room because I know what's going on there. Or, you know, she's kind of doing that. And at the same time, like, I really think she would love to have some appreciation, attention, and care from Mira. She doesn't get it from her daughter. She doesn't really seem to get it from her husband. And she gets it from this young man. And it's both. It's like part of it is like maternal, part of it is she's getting what she's not getting from her daughter. And the other part is she's getting something, yeah, from like a type of relationship she could have had, you know, like where they could have conversation and, you know, this person is actually, like you said, interested in her as a person and as opposed to just somebody who like, you know, irons the clothes and cooks the food and which is like the relationship with her husband seems so transactional, you know, and there's no doesn't seem to be a lot of like emotional connection and humor and all of that. So it's true. She's trying to get both of these things, and it's never, for me, it's never really about trying to get sex. I think she was never going to sleep with this guy. Like, that's not the thing. Like, what she wants is this, like, appreciation, like, see me as a person, you know, because nobody else in my life does. And I really loved how you put it. Yeah.
Yeah, like she like you said, she reads Mira like a book. She thinks 10 steps ahead of Mira, you know? Like
Yeah.
for instance, Mira is thinking, oh, I want to have my first sexual experience. And then Anila knows that's what she's going for, but Anila also knows, yeah, your ignorance can lead to you getting pregnant. You know, your ignorance can lead to you getting expelled from the school. Your ignorance can lead you to be getting publicly and socially shamed. All of these things are a domino effect. And Anila's thinking that Mira's not. You know, Mira's just thinking in the now. She's just thinking, I'm young, you know, I'm expressing myself and feeling myself. And Anila's like, no, I see where this is going. Like the scene, again, this is where a scene where so many people could misread it, where like where she tells Sri, you know, you're gonna sleep with me in the bed while Mira stays in her room. You know, and the reason she does that is because Mira was being obstinate. She wasn't listening because she was like, you can sleep out, he can sleep on the sofa. But Mira was like, no, let him sleep in the room. And like Anila was like, how about this? You're playing checkers, I'm gonna play chess. How about he sleeps with me and it's not gonna be a problem because she's not feeling any sexual attraction to him whatsoever. You know, she like, no, you can sleep with me and you can just stay in your bed. You got a problem with me snoring? You don't want to sleep with me? Well, then you sleep by yourself. Right. And like she was just like she saw where what Mira's intentions were. But if we're talking about Mira and Anila, I want also to talk about the Shri. Shri's an interesting character because well, yes, he does give Anila the attention and the appreciation that she wants, and he's also giving and Mira the attention and appreciation she wants from a sexual perspective. I saw him more as an example of how men can, you know, they'll be like the men say, oh, not all men, you know, like I'm the good guy, but are you? Because like he's a manipulator. You know, he read both of them like a book, and he used that to his advantage. You know, and like he unintentionally lies to Mira about his own past sexual experiences, showing that if you're going to lie about something that she directly asked you about, what else are you willing to lie about? Because their first interaction, he makes up a rule that they have to be completely honest with each other. But when you realize they're in the film, he's not. You know, he expects her to follow these rules that he himself isn't following. So talk to me about Shri and like basically him being an example of follow your gut instinct, because I think Anila kind of understood where he was coming from too, but she was feeling him out at first. But so talk to me about Sri, because he's an
Yeah.
interesting example of male what's the word, arrogance. He's just like Mira, but in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, the first I have to say, yeah, he's a super interesting character, but I also have a lot of compassion for him because so he does do this thing. He's like, he gives people what they want because then they like him and he has the charm and the intelligence to get away with it. And 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 in some ways it's like it is arrogant like my and I was workshopping this script and I had this amazing script mentor, Claire Downs, and she said, underneath charm there's often a river of contempt. And I thought that was so insightful about this character who's like, when you think you can get away with something, it's like you're smarter than them and and that's sort of his way, like he's giving people attention and appreciation, but it's in a very it's not because he's really connecting and he wants to know what they want, but it's like it's a way of getting what he wants.
Mhm.
and and yet at the same time I feel a lot of compassion for him, and because he's moved around, it seems like his parents are mostly absent. There is nobody in his life, in his family, who seems to give him that love and attention. So, and as someone who has moved around and gone to this school and that school, that's a kind of defense mechanism he has this, he's developed this way of very quickly being liked by people and,
Mhm.
inserting himself into like social constructs and groups that may have existed. And in this home with Mira and Anila, he gets the attention that he does not get at home. His parents don't even care to come for his 18th birthday, but Mira and Anila are going to put together a little celebration for him. So I sense like actually Keshav, who's like such a delightful person who plays Shri, he said, I see Shri as a boy who thinks he's a man.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really nice way to put it. Like he feels like he's in control, but but there's like a vulnerability that he's hiding. And at the same time, you're right that his arrogance is something in some ways we've all known men like this, who feel like they can get away with stuff, and that because they are charming or whatever, or they're smart, that will like let them.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's like kind of hard to see through, because in some ways like Shri, like a lot of these men, like tell Mira what she should think, how she should feel. Like she should feel good that he's friendly with her mother because that way the mother will allow them to meet, you know. He's sort of like, don't pay attention to your feelings. I'm telling you how this is. And we've known that, you know, we've known that kind of arrogance. But it was important to me that it's not just that, you know.
Yeah.
I also wanted, for me, for every character, it's really important. I have a lot of compassion for all of the characters, even like the
Mm.
bad ones in our film, you know. I think it's important for me as a writer to know where they're coming from
Mhm.
and in some ways put this in the film.
Right. And in talking about the bad characters, one of the last questions I want to ask you is about that, because there is this one particular male student who, because Mira rejects, and I didn't think she did it in a very nice and compassionate way, rejects his advances and his proposal, as she put it. And she was like, I don't want to be your girlfriend. I don't have to accept your postcard. And just because just because you shared your notes with me doesn't mean that we have to be boyfriend or girlfriend. And yes, I think him and his friends are an example of patriarchy, where how boys are taught that they are owed girls' attentions, you know, that they're owed our smiles, they're owed our attentions, and that we should be thankful for them giving us attention, you know, like just be, I like, yeah, here, I like you, therefore you must like me back, that kind of thing. But but then I was thinking about it, because in the very first scene, Mira gets she's introduced to the audience, but to these students, as she's the very first female head prefect in this school. And I kind of saw, when the more I thought about it, and then something you just said made me think that I'm wondering if a lot of his animosity and the animosity from the boys comes not just because of misogyny and sexism and patriarchy, but because they saw her as they saw this as an opportunity to take someone down a few pegs who's been placed in a position above them. You know, she's the first girl. Like, and I don't think they have a problem with female authority because they have a female principal. But she's someone that was on their level, a fellow student who's been placed above them. And they're like, wow, this is a chance to like let out my resentment about that. You know, this is a chance to use her as a target, because there is nothing before that really showed that they genuinely had any interest in her, but it's like they were like, oh, this is my time to bring her down a peg. And of course, the way they do that is using sex, you know, using sexual harassment and taunting, you know, and bullying. But talk to me about that particular aspect of the film, because in a way, I kind of saw that as an encapsulation of all the subjects, because Mira kind of tries to do the same thing to Anila, where she tries to embarrass Anila in public. She tries to embarrass her in front of the principal. She tries to embarrass her in front of Shri. And like all of the characters find some ways to bring each other down a peg in very subtle ways. But talk about that element of the film.
Yeah, I feel like these little power dynamics that play out in relationships are like definitely like my wheelhouse. I'm really interested in that because I think we do this all the time, you know, in like conversation and even amongst friends. Someone may make a joke that's like haha funny, but it's actually a little bit mean and trying to take someone down. And so I'm really interested in this. And but coming back to the film and this other student who's interested in Mira, and I think both your interpretations are actually what I had in mind. One is that him and his friends are a little bit annoyed with this girl who's like now enforcing the rules and thinks she's above them. And so, you know, they're not going to have her and they're going to show her who's boss. So that is definitely part of their animosity, the group's animosity towards her. And for this particular boy, I think he feels like, oh, well, he does well in school and they've been friends. Like, why won't she just date him? You know, like, as you said, so he does feel that. And you see that he's sort of egged on by his friends. It's like if he were alone, he may have been like, oh, okay, fine, you don't like me.
Yeah.
But then his friends are like, hey, why are you giving up? Come on, she owes you a thing, you know? So you also see like this kind of pack mentality, you know, where the boys kind of like egg each other on. And I also like there's a later scene where like you see the boys' parents and their fathers, and you see that these are kind of sort of abusive. They're verbally abusive, and you might sense that they probably might hit their sons, you know,
Yeah.
if they were not like in the public eye in school. And so it's also like this like cycle of violence that is passed down from the fathers to the sons, who are now enacting that on Mira and the girls in their school. And it's like I feel like that was also important for me to connect, where it's like not just these boys who are like the bad boys, but also they are within this like system, this structure where they are trained to be a certain way. There's a certain expectation of them, and they feel like the way to be a boy is this is what it means.
Yeah, and they won't change unless someone shows them. And at the school, there doesn't seem to be anyone who'll do that, because the principal is like protecting them, and like instead of telling them you guys need to do better, she's telling the girls, you guys just need to wear longer skirts and that kind of thing. Be quiet, sit quiet. And like the cycle will always continue until someone, both men and women, like say this is what needs to happen, this is what needs to be stopped. But if the principal, the person with the power within the school, isn't willing to like use her power to protect her female students, but also in a way protect the male students by showing them that they need to be better, nothing will get better, right? But I think that's also where, and we'll end up here, but I also love how you end the film. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but I love where Anila, basically she's the one who has to embarrass everyone. She's the one who puts everyone in their place. With one very short scene, you kind of show everyone that Anila is the one who's always had the most power. She's the one who's always not only the smartest, but the most intuitive, and also the most assertive of all the characters in the entire film. Even the principal, she's the one that's more assertive, because she just says one thing, she's like, get up, and they have to get up and move, right? And I love that you did that with her, because she's a character that people in the society that values education above everything else and status, she's the one. She says, I may not have gone to college, but I'm way more than any of you give me credit for, including my own daughter. And like Mira sees that at the end, and Mira has to realize, oh, okay, and now I understand. And that's why she at the end is doing an act of service for her mom, instead of her mom doing an act of service for her, like combing her hair. And that one was a beautiful scene to me, because it reminded me of me. I used to comb my mom's hair when she had hair, because she has like short hair now. And my grandma's hair, because my grandmother had long hair too. And it was just like, finally someone is doing something for Anila, just because, there's
Yeah.
no motivation behind it. And I love that you ended the film that way.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah. And it's true. It's like, Anila in some ways is already judged and outcast by her daughter, within her family, and a little bit by society. Like you see that the Miss Bansal, the principal at school, she also snubs the mom a little bit. So you see, she's already been the outcast. And Mira feels that her power comes from her position in society, from being the celebrated head prefect. So, she's kind of afraid when she loses this position, but her mom's not afraid.
Yeah.
Her mom's like, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
This is all anyway, smoke and mirrors.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about how you treat people, right? And like, it's about how you treat people is what matters. And like Anila treats everyone with respect till they step out of line, of course. But thank you so much for talking with me, Shuchi. I really appreciate this, and this was a great conversation. I wish we had more time, but I know you have to go, because I had some questions about like the cinematography and like the music. But again, I really love this film, and I hope so many people get to see it, because it's a really interesting look at female dynamics, and as you called it, a mother-daughter coming of age story. So like, congratulations. Yay.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I really enjoyed this conversation. I loved your close reading of the film. So, yeah, thank you so much for bringing me on.
Yay, thank you. And have an enjoyable festival season. Wait, no, you said you're going back. So like, have a safe trip back
Thank
home.
you. All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.